Karen Whitmore stood in her pristine front yard at 6:47 a.m., binoculars raised, watching her new neighbor Marcus install what was clearly, obviously, definitely, a stolen swimming pool. She'd seen enough episodes of Neighborhood Watch Weekly to know suspicious activity when she spotted it, and this 28-year-old with his backwards baseball cap and power tools was practically screaming criminal mastermind. "Excuse me," she shrieked, marching across the perfectly manicured grass in her fuzzy pink slippers, HOA violation notices clutched in her free hand like holy scriptures. "That pool is 3 inches too close to the property line." Marcus looked up from his instruction manual, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early hour. "Ma'am, I measured it twice. It's exactly where the permit says it should be." "Permit?" Karen's laugh could have shattered windows. "Young man, I am the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. I know every permit issued in this neighborhood, and there's no way someone like you could afford a legitimate pool installation." The words hung in the air like a neon sign advertising her assumptions. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Someone like me?" "Well," Karen gestured vaguely at his appearance, her brain scrambling to backtrack without actually apologizing. "Someone so young. These pools cost thousands. Where would you get that kind of money?" "From my job," Marcus replied, turning back to his work. "I'm a software engineer." Karen's face flushed crimson. In her 15 years as HOA president, she'd never been wrong about a violation. She'd built her entire identity around being the neighborhood's watchdog, the one who kept property values high and riffraff out. This scruffy kid couldn't just waltz in and make her look foolish. "I don't believe you," she declared, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police. This pool is stolen property, mark my words." As she dialed, Karen caught sight of Mrs. Chen from across the street peeking through her curtains, and old Mr. Rodriguez pausing his morning dog walk to stare. Good. Let them see her taking action, protecting their neighborhood from obvious criminal activity. 911? "Yes, I need to report a theft in progress. A young man is installing stolen property in my neighborhood." She paused dramatically, making sure Marcus could hear every word. "The address is 1247 Maple Lane, and I have reason to believe this individual has stolen an entire swimming pool." Marcus stopped working entirely now, standing slowly and facing her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For the first time since spotting him that morning, Karen felt a tiny flutter of uncertainty in her chest. But she was Karen Whitmore, HOA president and neighborhood guardian. She was never wrong about these things. Was she? 23 minutes later, Officers Rodriguez and Kim arrived to find Karen pacing her driveway like a general preparing for battle, while Marcus sat calmly on his porch steps, a folder of documents in his lap. "Ma'am, you reported a theft?" Officer Rodriguez asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. "That's right. This man." Karen jabbed her finger toward Marcus like she was casting a spell, "is installing stolen property. I've been HOA president for 15 years, and I know suspicious activity when I see it." Officer Kim glanced at the half-assembled pool, then at Marcus. "Sir, do you have documentation for this purchase?" Marcus stood, extending the folder with a slight smile. "Purchase receipt, delivery confirmation, installation permit from the city, and HOA approval from." He paused, consulting a paper. "The Architectural Review Committee, signed 3 weeks ago." Karen's stomach dropped like a stone. "That's impossible. I chair that committee. I never signed." "Actually," Marcus said gently, "you were on vacation. Mrs. Patterson handled the approval. She said something about you being in Capo." The memory hit Karen like a slap. Her Instagram posts from the beach, her automatic out-of-office email, the stack of committee business she'd left for Vice President Patterson. But that didn't matter. Patterson was supposed to consult her on major decisions. "Well, I'm overruling that approval," Karen announced, her voice climbing an octave. "As president, I have executive authority too." "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez interrupted, scanning the documents. "Everything appears to be in order. The permit's valid, the purchase is legitimate, and he has HOA approval. But the property line." Karen grasped at her last straw. It's too close. Marcus pulled out a surveyor's report, professional measurement. It's exactly 18 inches from the line, which exceeds the minimum requirement of 12 inches. Karen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Around them, neighbors had begun emerging from their houses, drawn by the police cars. Mrs. Chen stood on her front steps with her arms crossed. The Johnsons whispered to each other from their driveway. Even teenagers had started gathering, phones out, probably live streaming her humiliation. There has to be something, Karen muttered, then louder. What about noise ordinances? Construction can't begin before 7 am. It's 7:31, Officer Kim noted, checking her watch. Marcus's slight smile widened. I waited until exactly 7:01 to start. The officers exchanged glances. Officer Rodriguez handed the documents back to Marcus. Sir, sorry for the inconvenience. Ma'am, false reporting is a serious matter. Maybe next time. This isn't over, Karen interrupted, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and embarrassment. I'll be reviewing every single document, every measurement, every regulation. If there's even the tiniest violation. She trailed off as she noticed Marcus's expression had changed. The polite patience was gone, replaced by something harder. Mrs. Whitmore, he said quietly, I'd be very careful about harassment claims. That evening, Karen sat in her home office surrounded by HOA bylaws, city ordinances, and property regulations spread across every surface like war plans. Her husband Dale peeked in, holding a cup of coffee and wearing his world's okayest husband shirt. Honey, maybe you should let this go, he suggested carefully. The kid seems nice enough, and the pool looks nice. Karen's head snapped up like a cobra. Dale, I spent 15 years building a reputation in this neighborhood. 15 years ensuring property values, maintaining standards, keeping the riffraff out. I can't let some smart-mouth software engineer make me look like a fool. But he didn't do anything wrong. That's what he wants us to think. Karen slammed her hand on the desk, sending papers flying. There has to be something. A missed signature, a measurement error, a regulation he overlooked. Nobody's perfect. Dale backed away slowly. After 22 years of marriage, he recognized this look. This was Karen in full obsession mode, and nothing good ever came from that. By morning, Karen had found her ammunition, a 1987 addendum to the original HOA charter requiring aesthetic compatibility review for any permanent outdoor installations. The pool's modern design clashed with the neighborhood's traditional family atmosphere, and Marcus hadn't submitted the proper AC7 form for aesthetic approval. She printed 17 copies of the violation notice, triple-checking every word before marching to Marcus's door at exactly 8 am. Mr. Collins, she announced when he answered, still in pajamas and holding a coffee mug that read World's Okayest Software Engineer. I'm serving you with formal violation notice HOA 2025-87. Your pool installation violates aesthetic compatibility standards established in 1987. Marcus stared at the document, then at Karen. This form wasn't required 3 weeks ago. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, Karen replied smugly. You have 7 days to submit proper documentation or face daily fines of $50. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus's voice had an edge now. Are you seriously going to harass me over a pool that's already approved, permitted and half-installed? I'm enforcing community standards, young man. Something your generation doesn't seem to understand. That's when Marcus smiled, and Karen suddenly felt like she just walked into a trap. You know what? He said, pulling out his phone. I think it's time I learned about community standards too, starting with HOA President accountability procedures. The phone's camera focused on her face just as Karen realized she might have pushed too far. The emergency HOA meeting convened in the community center 3 days later, packed with more residents than Karen had seen in years. She sat at the head table, surrounded by printed regulations and legal precedents, watching Marcus enter with what appeared to be half the neighborhood following him. This meeting will come to order, Karen announced, banging her gavel harder than necessary. We're here to address complaints regarding enforcement of aesthetic compatibility standards. No, interrupted Mrs. Patterson, the silver-haired vice president who'd signed Marcus's original approval. We're here to address complaints about you, Karen. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen felt her control slipping like sand through her fingers. Marcus stood slowly. Mrs. Whitmore has filed 17 different violation notices against me in 3 days. She's claimed my pool is stolen, improperly permitted, too close to the property line, aesthetically incompatible, and yesterday she tried to cite me for suspicious chemical odors from pool chlorine. Nervous laughter bubbled up from the audience. Karen's face burned. Furthermore, Marcus continued, she's been taking pictures of my property from her bedroom window, timing my daily activities, and questioning my neighbors about my suspicious behavior, which, according to state law, constitutes harassment and stalking. That's not. Karen stammered, but the words wouldn't come. Because it was true, all of it. Mrs. Chen stood up. She asked me if I'd seen him bringing stolen goods into his house. I told her those were Amazon packages. Mr. Rodriguez joined in. She wanted to know if I'd witnessed any drug-dealing activities. Turns out she was talking about the pizza delivery guy. Karen watched her reputation crumble in real time. These people, her neighbors, her constituents, were laughing at her. The woman who'd kept their property values high, who'd maintained order and standards, who'd protected them from decline and chaos. I was protecting this neighborhood, she shouted, standing so quickly her chair fell backward. I was maintaining the standards that keep this place respectable. Someone has to care about property values and community integrity. The room fell silent. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been pity. Mrs. Whitmore, he said gently, I'm a software engineer with a 6-figure salary, a credit score over 800, and a down payment that was larger than most people's annual income. I'm exactly the kind of neighbor you should want. But you couldn't see past your assumptions. The truth hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd spent so much energy fighting imaginary threats that she'd become the actual problem. Mrs. Patterson called for a vote of no confidence. The count was 37-3. Karen gathered her papers with shaking hands, her kingdom of clipboard authority crumbling around her. As she reached the door, Marcus's voice stopped her. Mrs. Whitmore, for what it's worth, you're welcome to use the pool anytime. After it's finished. She paused, hand on the door handle, tasting the bitter irony. The pool she'd fought so hard to stop would be the most beautiful addition to their neighborhood in years. And somehow, despite everything, Marcus was still trying to be kind. Karen walked home alone, wondering who she was if she wasn't the neighborhood's watchdog. Behind her, she could hear the community beginning to heal itself, planning block parties and pool gatherings, building the connections she'd spent 15 years trying to control. The real question wasn't whether she'd learned her lesson. The question was whether it was too late to become the neighbor she'd always claimed to be.